Okay. One of the fundamental questions that students have when they first start trying to study Chumash at a higher level is how to translate a pasuk correctly. A lot of times you can't even begin your deeper analysis until you know what the words mean. And part of this challenge is how to pick the right amount of words to translate at a time. Let me illustrate this with an example from Shmot Perek Aleph, which is in our 10th grade Chumash curriculum. Pasuk Chet. Let's say we translate this one word at a time, which is what we're often tempted to do. So we say, okay, Vayakom, he got up. Melech, a king. Charash, new. Al Mitzrayim, over Egypt. So what was that again? He got up, a king, new, over Egypt. That's really bad English. Basically, it makes no sense. Um, the alternative to that is to say, you know what, I'm going to read a lot of text and only then will I try and translate, because obviously that didn't work out too well. I have to read a little further. Maybe when I see the big picture, it'll make sense. So let's try that. Vayakol melech chadash al Mitzrayim asher lo yadat Yosef, vayomer elamo hinei am b'nei Yisrael ravu v'atzum mimenu. Now let's translate. And what happens when we do that, we did so much text, so the truth is, none of these words are that hard, Vayakol melech chadash. But if we read too much before we stop and translate, maybe for some of you, words like Rav and especially Atzum, maybe those are somewhat harder words. And so you're already starting to get nervous about those words. And so it's hard to focus and say, wait a minute, if we had the right, bite-sized little units over here, we could handle translating pretty much everything here correctly. And so I want to give you a very practical tip for how to find the right size units to divide the psukim by. Notice in red over here, by every word, there's a note from what we call the trop, or in proper Hebrew, the ta'amei hamikra. In formal English, the cantillation notes, the musical notes that we use for singing the psukim in shul. Right? Every one of these words has a note like that. If a word, let's say Yerech, doesn't have its own notes, that's because it has this line linking it to Yaakov. So the note on Yaakov counts for both words. So these notes, their primary function is to provide a tune, right? Any shul you go to, when there's laning, when there's Kriyat Torah, you'll hear them singing it according to some sort of tune. It's a somewhat different tune in a Sephardic shul than an Ashkenazic shul. Even within each group, sometimes there's subgroups. The German Yekisha tune is a little different than the standard Ashkenazic tune. But in addition to their musical function, these notes also play a role in breaking up a sentence. Now take a look at this picture for a second. You see how we have two groups here. There's what's called the Ta'amim Mafsikim and the Ta'amim Mishartim. Mafsikim, a hefsek, the hafsik is to stop, to break something up. So Ta'amim Mafsikim are notes that tell you there's some sort of a pause. Now there's so many notes like this that they're ranked in 4 different categories. The category 1 is the strongest break, like a sof pasuk, for example. The end of a pasuk, that's a very strong break. It's the end of a whole pasuk. And then the next level down are a little bit weaker. They're called melachim, kings. It's a little bit weaker than kesarim, which would be like emperors. And then we have some minor category 3 breaks and some really, really minor category 4 breaks. So when we're trying to get a bite-sized unit, we don't want to have too few words. So we're going to stick to category 1 and category 2. Basically, when we see a note in one of these 2 categories, in theory, that'll tell us we're at a meaningful break in the pasuk. But let's look at that a little more closely. Let's zoom in here on our group 1 and group 2 breaks over here. And if we look at these a little more closely, what we see, so in theory, that looks like a long list of notes, right? We got the 2 really strong breaks, then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 more. But let's start eliminating some. Shalshelet almost never comes up in the whole Torah, so we don't need to worry about that. Tipcha, for reasons I'm not going to explain right now, ends up almost never being as big a break as you'd think. Zakef Gadol, that note tends to appear when you only have 1 or 2 words before a big break. And we're looking for bigger units than that, so we're not going to use Zakef Gadol either. So we basically have then just 3 notes that we really seem to consider to be meaningful breaks. And right? I mean, obviously there's the Sof Pasuk over here, but that's obvious, right? We don't need a video to tell us that if you're at the end of a Pasuk, that's a good place to stop. We need the video to tell us about other cases. So there's that Nachta, this one that looks kind of like a wishbone. See that wishbone over there? And then there's the Zakef Katon, these, two dots on top of a word. And then there's the Segolta, this like triangle of three dots pointing upward on top of a word. These three notes are the three notes we're interested in for breaking up psukim into units that we can handle. So let's see how this would apply to those psukim that we were looking at. So we're told, let's look through this pasuk and we'll stop when we see a note on that list. Vayako melech hadash al Mitzrayim, stop. Over here, see that wishbone? That's our big pause. Let's set that apart from the rest of the pasuk. This is a manageable unit. It's not too short, not too long. Vayako melech hadash al Mitzrayim, a new king rose up over Egypt. And the rest of the pasuk's not too long either. Asher lo yadat Yosef. This king didn't know Yosef. Now, Etnachta is the strongest break, but there's a catch for the Etnachta. The Etnachta has a rule that at most there can be only one per pasuk. Only one in the pasuk. So with a longer pasuk, you're not going to have multiple Etnachtas. So it's the other breaks. Let's continue. So this new king rose up over Egypt who didn't know Yosef. Vayomer elamo. Again, we have an Etnachta. We're going to pause. And it's a very manageable length of unit. Vayomer elamo. He said to his nation, Hine am b'nei Yisrael. We've got the Zakef Katon on top, the two dots on top. He says, behold, this nation of b'nei Yisrael, Rav Atzum Mimenu. So here, finally, we have some words that are a little bit harder. If you look up Rav or Atzum in the dictionary, you'll see that Rav is like the word harbe. It means a lot. And Atzum means that they're very mighty or powerful. So this nation of b'nei Yisrael is many and more powerful mimenu than us. So each of these 5 units that we got out of these 2 psukim, 1, 2 in Pasuk Chet, and then 3 in Pasuk Tet, those are all units that we can handle for translating in a reasonable way. They're long enough that we don't have that problem of saying, he got up, a king, knew. We can read the whole phrase and realize that in Hebrew, oftentimes the person doing the action comes after the action. So in English we'll say a king rose up. In the Hebrew order, the verb rose up comes first and then the king, and we have to put the king first when we translate. And same thing, the adjective, the word that describes the king, that often comes first in English. So we'd say a new king, new describing the king. In Hebrew, we first say king and then new. So literally this means rose up, a king new, but in proper English, a new king rose up over Egypt. Following the same method, let's see an example from the 9th grade curriculum as well. The ha'adam yadad chava ishto. Now here we're going to use a little judgment. Really, with the Zakef Katon over there, we could stop after va'adam. But we want to get a whole phrase, so we're going to run that stop sign. Don't ever do that when you drive. It's terrible to run stop signs when driving. But when reading, sometimes we're going to run through a stop sign. And we're going to go until the next stop, which is the wishbone by Ishto. V'ha'adam yada et chava Ishto. Let's make a little break over there. So that's a manageable unit. Adam, the man, knew Chava, his wife, and knew is a euphemism, a polite way of saying that he slept with her. He had relations with her. Vatahar vatelet kain, and again, here we see a good break, right? There's a Zakef Katon. That's one of those notes that tells us a break. We have a reasonable length phrase. She conceived or became pregnant. Herayon is pregnancy, so she got pregnancy. She became pregnant, and she gave birth to Cain. And Vatomer, she said, remember that note that we crossed out? Zakef Gadol? This is an example of why I crossed it out, right? Because it tends to come when we only have one word and then we want to break. So I understand why the Teamim did that. It's telling us she said, and then it's giving the quote of what she said. But we don't need to stop every word to translate, so we're going to go through that and say, she said, literally, I acquired a man with God, or I bought a man with God. And, either this year if you're in 9th grade, or last year if now you're in 10th grade, we discussed how it's hard to translate this literally to say I bought a man from God. It probably means something more like I created a man with God. But in any event, that's just because the word kaniti is difficult in this context. It's not because we broke it up wrong. By breaking it up into 3 units like that, based on the Ta'mei HaMikra, the trap, we have reasonable units to translate. Let's go on to the next pasuk. But Tosef Laleret, Lahosif means to add or to continue, like Musaf is the added prayer. And we see that's a good place to stop, because there's a note there. So she continued to give birth. That's why many Meforshim say this next kid was a twin. And who did she give birth to this time? Et Achiv et Hevel, his brother Hevel. And there we see another stop. So that's how we need to translate this. She continued to give birth to his brother Hevel. Vayi Hevel roet son. Stop. So Hevel was a herder of sheep, in plain English, a shepherd. Hevel was a shepherd. The Kayin, and again, Kayin, there's a Zakif Gadol there, which we decided we're not going to stop at, even though it's supposedly considered a big stop, because it comes after only one word. So we read through that. V'Kayin haya oved adama. Kayin was somebody who worked the land. In plain English, Kayin was a farmer. Now, the last note that we mentioned, the segol, is not as common, and so we don't have it in any of the psukim that we did just now. So we're going to look elsewhere in Shemot chapter 12 with the laws of the Korban Pesach, the laws of the sacrifice we bring on Pesach night. The Torah says, Lo totiru mimenu ad boker, don't leave over till morning. We know that's a good unit to pause because of the etnachta. And continues, whatever is left over of it until morning, you shall burn in a fire. That's, a typical pasuk where Nachta splits it into 2 units. Then we continue. V'chacha tochlu oto, that's already a good place to pause when we hit that segol. It's a good, nice length of unit. V'chacha tochlu oto, thus, or this is how you shall eat it. This is how you should eat the Korban Pesach. We have a bunch of phrases here. One has a zakef katon after it, so we'll take a break. And the next one has another zakef katon. And the next one has an etnachta. Those are all pauses. It's 3 short phrases. How do you eat a Korban Pesach? With your belt, with your loins girded. Chagora is a belt. To gird your loins means to put a belt around you. So with a belt around your waist, and also with na'lechem braglechem, with shoes on your feet, and with makelchem, and makel is a stick, with your stick in your hand. So all 3 of these phrases are basically saying you have to be all ready to race out of Egypt when you eat your Korban Pesach in Egypt. So you eat it, you already have your belt on, your shoes on, and your walking stick in your hand. V'chaltem oto b'chipazon, pause, for the zakef katon. You shall eat it hastily, in a hurry. Pesach ul Hashem, and this is a Pesach sacrifice for Hashem. And again, the next pasuk, Hashem says, I'm going to go through all of Egypt on this night. If you don't stop at that, you're going to be going for a long time until it's like Zakef Katon, the next pause. And so it's important to pause at the Segol as well. So Hashem says, I will pass through. The Avor is to pass through. I will pass through Egypt on this night. And I will strike down every firstborn, every Bechor in Egypt, from human firstborn to animal firstborn. The Nachta tells us to pause. And then we have this final phrase, which is a little bit longer, where God says, I will mete out justice, Shvatim, against all the gods of Egypt. I am Hashem. So if we follow this method, we wind up with a bunch of manageable units. So just to review, in theory, this whole column are the major pauses. But in fact, because we eliminated a bunch of them, we only have 3 notes we're always looking out for. We're looking out for the etnachta, which is a very strong pause, that wishbone note, but that there can only be one of those per pasuk. Some psukim don't have any if it's a very short pasuk. Then we look for the zakef katon, the 2 dots over a word, and the segol, which is less common, that's why I put it third, the segol, that triangle of 3 dots above a word. Yeah, we should be able to break up every pasuk into manageable units that we can translate.